Welcome to a new episode of The Brand Called You. I am Arini and I am with Ashutosh Garg, a seasoned entrepreneur and the founder of the Guardian Pharmacy and Equation Coaching. Hello, sir.
Hi, Arvi.
Today we are discussing branding for startups. To start with, I would like to ask, what is branding?
So, brand is something which, in a very simple manner, is Arani Chowdhury. That's your brand. Brands are like Coke, brands are like Pepsi, IBM, ITC, and so on and so forth. But brands are really like children. And like you've got to keep nurturing your child to enable your child to grow and prosper, brands need exactly the same kind of inputs.
Right.
You've got to keep on giving regular inputs to your brand. You've got to keep on nurturing your brand. You've got to keep on supporting your brand, because only with all this on a consistent 365-day basis will you start to see a brand will start to fly. Otherwise, with no support, and there are thousands of examples in the world, a brand will start to die.
Right.
So a brand needs constant sustenance.
So you mentioned that a brand is like a child. And like a child, when a child is born, the first challenge is to find the right name for the child. Similarly, in a startup, the major challenge in front of an entrepreneur is to find the right name for the startup.
Correct.
So how important do you think is the name in a startup's journey?
So Aruni, let's compare this with what happens when you name a child, right? Indian parents, or for that matter, parents anywhere in the world, always select a name for their child that they identify with.
Right.
In India, we've got lots of names that come out of our mythological books, from Mahabharata, from Ramayana, and we select names which have multiple meanings. We go to the rishis, we go to the different kinds of the Vedas that we pick up names from them, and I don't think you'll come across any Indian who's not able to say what is the meaning of my name.
Right.
And that is probably based on the aspirations that my parents had for me. So therefore, if you take examples of say Ramayana, much as people may respect Ravan because of his knowledge,
Right.
and the fact that he was such a learned man, you won't have anyone calling their child Ravan.
Right.
Similarly, in Europe, you won't have anyone calling their child Hitler
Or Lucifer.
or Lucifer, right? So therefore, I think naming their child is very, very important.
Right.
And getting the right name for your startup, a classic case that comes to my mind is from General Motors many years ago, when in the 50s, the chairman of General Motors was Alfred P. Sloan. In his book, he has written that they brought in a car which they thought was going to be the ultimate car, but they named it Edsel, Edsel. That meant nothing to the American consumer. And because the name meant nothing, they decided that they didn't want to take it. So there are many examples of very well-researched names which have bombed completely.
Right.
And it becomes therefore very important for us to make sure that when we have a startup, we name it correctly.
Right.
The name should represent the aspirations of the promoter.
Right.
The name must represent what the business is going to do. You cannot have one name and then realize that it has nothing to do with the business. And it must be in a position to get used, and in today's context, across multiple social media channels.
Right.
You can't have a name which is such an incredible tongue twister that you just can't pronounce it, or you can't use it across different platforms.
Right. I have friends who are young parents, now they select their child's name based on the availability of the domain.
There you are.
So if a .com is available, okay, this is the name. If it's not, okay,
Well,
no,
see.
sorry. Okay, coming back to the startup branding exercise, how important it is to know what my competition is doing, how important it is to know what their brand stands for, the colors, the logos. Is it important to do a competitive research?
Very, very critical. When I launched the Guardian pharmacy brand, we did a lot of research to find out what competition was doing. We didn't have too much competition in India, but we certainly took a lot of learning from the global chains. How did they present their brand? How did they represent it on their big store signages? How were the brands represented on stationery? What did the brand stand for? Did the brand and its tagline have any relationship with one another? And most importantly, was the brand similar, or was it seen as copying something that a competitor stood for? So there are a lot of things that you need to be able to sit down and think about before you finally christen your startup.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Now you mentioned that if it's similar, if a brand is similar to the competition, we see a lot of brands, especially in the food space, use the same colors, which is primarily red. How important is it to keep my brand unique? Is it, and especially in the food space, if I talk about, everybody is using red. Is there some psychology behind it? Should I look at color psychology before doing my branding, or should I just do what I feel is right for my brand?
Very, very interesting question, Arvi. Classical branding and marketing suggests red is a powerful color. Yellow is an interesting color. Blue is interesting color. Black does not denote the right kind of senses of communication. And yet, if you look at a global brand like McDonald's, which for as long as I can remember was always red, has started to change its color to green.
Yes.
Its stores have started to change to green because they wanted to be able to communicate that here is a brand that is living up to the aspirations of the community and is becoming more health conscious. When I launched Guardian, I was advised by people to stick with the traditional colors, and I decided to go with purple. And it took me a little while to convince people that purple was the color of Guardian. And the best proof of the color of a brand is when others start to copy the color. So in a few years after we launched purple as the color for Guardian, we started to see many other local chemists in different cities painting their shutters purple color.
Wow.
To get some kind of
similarity with the brand.
A rub-off effect from the Guardian color.
Right.
So color is important, but if a promoter has strong views, I think you can go with pretty much any color. What is important is that it must be readable. Okay. It must be visible. You can't put your brand in 6 different shades of the same primary color and then say that my brand color is not working.
Okay. Now, with these information at hand, where should I start my branding exercise? What should be my first step? How should I treat my brand? Where should I start?
So one thing for you to consider when you are starting is, I'm assuming that once you've decided on your startup and you have decided what name you're going to give your startup, and you have started to define what your brand stands for. And brands stand for many, many different things. I think it's important for you to sit and define, to start with, what is your target audience? Will your brand be presented as a male or a female? What values will your brand stand for?
Okay.
Will your brand be seen as something which is very, very ethical? Will it be seen as something which will have strong values? All these things will evolve based on what you as the promoter have in your own mind for your business and for your brand.
Okay.
Once you've identified all this, then I have a strong belief that instead of sitting down in front of your computer and designing your own brand, go to a professional, brief them well,
Okay.
ask them to give you a few options.
Okay.
And when you have a few options, which could be how you're going to present your brand, what is the font going to be, what is the color of the brand going to be,
Right.
then get those 5, 6, 7, 10 options, discuss it with people you trust. If you have co-promoters, go with your co-promoters. If you have board members, talk to your board members. If you've several colleagues in the company, talk to them. And then take a decision on which one you want to go with. Once you have decided what you want to go with, then you have to stick to that with a passion.
Okay.
And one of the big mistakes I see a lot of startups make is that they give the flexibility to people to make changes to their brand, to their logo, based on what people feel like.
Okay.
And the first place where I've seen a lot of so-called innovation taking place based on individuals is on the visiting card. I'm sure you have seen
Yes.
dozens of visiting cards from one company, all of them saying different things. People have put their logo on the left corner, right corner, center, their name is somewhere else. And that's the first place where non-standardization starts, and that's where you start to hurt your brand. Because if you and your colleagues do not respect the brand on the first communication you make, which is your visiting card, then it tells me a lot of things about your organization, which says that this is an organization that doesn't really respect its brand, or it doesn't trust its brand.
Okay. You mentioned that I should hire professional help, but why can't I use free tools like Canva to design my logo? It just costs either free or it costs as low as $5. So why should I go with a professional when I can do it on my own?
Simply because you're not a designer of logos.
Right.
And it is your logo or your brand is going to be the key value of your company in the long term. And this would be the smallest investment you would make in your journey as an entrepreneur to get a well-designed, well-produced logo with very clearly defined colors. And I would strongly urge people not to design their own logos and their own brand, but to let some professional do it.
Right. I have had clients who have gone through 600 iterations of a
Incredible.
logo. I've shared this with you before. Now, you mentioned that once you have those 5, 6, 7 options from your designer, you share it with your colleagues, you share it with people you trust. Now, how many people should be a part of this decision-making process that this is the logo and this is not? How should I collect feedback from the people I trust? Should I have everybody in my team, in my company, to be a part of the decision-making process, or should I devise a feedback mechanism and then take it to the logo designer? Because one of the major frustrations of a logo designer, me being one, or I know quite a few people who design logos, is the client simply doesn't understand innovation or creativity. So what do you suggest the brief we should give to a logo designer, and what do you think should be the feedback process?
So once you have options in hand, I think the first and most important thing is for the promoter or the entrepreneur to take a decision. And you've got to go with your gut feel. I have been through, sat in large companies, sat around boards. Someone comes with a brand for a new product, and most of the board members will look at it and then they'll start giving inane kind of suggestions. maybe the red should be a little more red, or why don't you make the green a little more green, or maybe if you were to make it slightly smaller, it may not. I'm giving you these examples because a lot of people want to give inputs because they think they are expected to give inputs. And if you get caught in that chakravyuh of having to keep on and on and on, going back and forth, you can give up designing of your logo. So, to cut a long story short, get your logo designed, take a call based on yourself as the entrepreneur, because you're going to be risking your own capital behind that logo and the brand. Talk to your a few trusted colleagues. When I say few, means 2, 3, 4 colleagues. Not give it out to 100 people and say, let me have opinions, because then you'll have 100 opinions and you'll be completely confused.
Right.
So, as a startup entrepreneur, I think what's most important is to take a decision and move. And if after a few years you've realized that you really want to make a change, go ahead and make the change. Many companies go through rebranding. Many companies change their taglines. They may not change their brand as such, but a lot of changes are possible.
So you're saying that logo is the first true test of leadership of an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, now that I have my branding in place, how should I ensure that my staff respects my brand and follows the guidelines that I've laid out for them?
So I'll tell you an interesting story that I faced. I used to have a tough time convincing a lot of our staff that the Guardian brand is a brand that you have to respect. Because at the end of the day, all of us are making our money from this brand and what this brand is communicating to our consumers. And I used to find a lot of people would not take the kind of interest that I expected them to take. So on one rainy day, I walked into a store and it was raining, so the staff must have got wet in the rain. So he had taken off his shoes and he was standing behind the counter. And I looked on the floor and he had a poster of Guardian on which he was standing. Now, I could have had a reaction of getting angry or upset and saying, what are you doing? You're putting your feet on top of the brand name. Instead of doing that, I said, let me be a little more polite. And I said, why don't you write your name on a sheet of paper and give it to me? So he thought that maybe, he's going to be awarded for something that he had done. So in big bold letters, he wrote his name on a white sheet of paper and gave it to me. In front of him, I put the paper on the floor and then I said that, now shall I put my feet on it? He says, no, sir, you can't do that. That's my name. How can you put your shoes on my name? So then I said, then why look down and he looked down and he was standing on the Guardian name. And he immediately stepped off that paper and he said, I made a mistake. And that message went through all 200 stores across the country in a few days. So I think, to answer your question, if the people of the organization don't respect the brand, then we cannot expect the customer to respect the brand. Only if I have pride in my own company's brand will I be able to communicate that sense of pride to my customer. So it's important for everyone to be able to buy into what your brand stands for, what are the brand values, and what are the aspirations of the organization.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for your insights. I think you truly put branding in a very new perspective and actionable insights.
Thank you, Arun.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions or comments for us, please leave it in the comment section. We'll be happy to take it next time. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You podcast. Be sure to visit tbcy.in to join the conversation, access show notes, and discover fantastic bonus content. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Simply search for The Brand Called You. Thank you and see you next week.